But keep the slide. But keep the slide. All right. Oops, what happened to the clicker? I don't know. Oh, yes.
Well, holy Moses.
That's
That's
appropriate.
appropriate. I'm Paul McBride from the McBride Furniture Moving Department, and I want to welcome all of you here. This promises to be quite a fascinating evening, and it had better be, Jack. We will not only hear from Jack, but we also will hear from Diane, who will be introducing her husband and his, I think, fascinating talk on Jews in Arab-speaking lands. Diane? Please turn off all of your devices.
Hi, I'm thrilled to see so many people here. I'm here to introduce my husband, Jack, my husband of 55 years. He did his graduate work at Brandeis University, where he focused on Mediterranean and Islamic studies. And in 1966, came to a place just down the road, a different color of blue, Chapel Hill, where he was on the faculty at UNC Chapel Hill in the Department of Religious Studies for 33 years. In 1999, he went to Vanderbilt University, where he was a professor of Judaic and Biblical Studies. But when it came time to retire in 2015, we decided to move back to this part of North Carolina. And so we have been here for the last 9 years, becoming foresters just a few months ago. So we're happy to be here, and I'm happy to turn it over to Jack.
Diane exaggerates. It's been only 54 and a half years, but for her it seems like 55. Well, thank you all for coming here. I haven't seen a crowd like this since Trump's inauguration. I mean, this is really amazing. All right, so the first thing I want to say is that we're not going to solve the Arab-Israeli problem. All right, so do not expect any solution to anything. This is going to be a rather less ambitious presentation about what life was like for Jews who lived in the Middle East when there used to be a good number of them there. I'll say more about it in a second. So first, I want to thank Paul and Linda McBride for inviting me. I want to thank Amari, give her a for not only doing all this and preparing us to hear this talk, but this gorgeous poster that she produced. And also the Forest at Duke for making this space available, and every one of you for being here. All right, so let me go back to what you were hearing just now, because there's a little piece of information there that might be useful. What you are hearing is what's called in Hebrew a pismon. That is songs that are sung with melodies. Now, the melody is Arabic completely. The words are Hebrew. But in this particular pismon, almost every one of the words that you hear at the first line are also almost understandable in Arabic. At-ta'il kabir rahum varab. In this line, one word, in fact, is truly Arabic. There is no Hebrew in it at all, kabir. So you can see now the mix of what that world is like. It is really, truly Arabic speaking, but Hebrew is the center language for the religion. The other thing that you may notice is that you have musical instrument, which would mean that it was not played in synagogues, because the community in almost all Arabic countries do not know anything about reform. I will tell you more about it in a second. They are Orthodox, which means that music is not played at all. Musical instrument is not played at all in synagogue. The third thing you may notice is that it is really voices that are all male. You are not going to have any women in any of these choirs. Women were not really participant in the religious activities or even in the ceremonial activities. This kind of song usually takes place never on Saturday, but in someone's home when you have a happy occasion. Even though they're singing about God, nonetheless, this is what it's about. Okay, so you see what is the background. Now, this is going to be amazing. All right, now let's go to the next one. Uh, Amari, this is not working. Keep on going. All right, now I'm inviting you all to my bar mitzvah. It'll be 70 years late, but nonetheless, in October, I was bar mitzvah. Now, here's the point that I want to make here. You will notice that the invitation is in French. So already we have Arabic and Hebrew, but the culture is supposedly French oriented. So here, Mr. and Mrs. Murad H. Sasson, Papa and Mama, are very happy to invite you to the bar mitzvah of their son, Jack. Notice my name. Jack in English, in fact, is James. It is like Saint Jack. Saint Jacques is really Saint James. In America, when I came here, I thought I was going to be Jack Palance because I was an admirer of his. So I said Jack, and they wrote it down, and that's how I am. I am now Jack. All right, so they invite you to the ceremony that takes place on Thursday morning. This is when the boy comes and he learns how to put on what you see in his arm, tefillin. That makes him into a 13-year-old adult. And the other thing that they say is afterwards, on Saturday, they will have at their home, you are welcome to come to their home at Wadi Abu Jmil on Saturday, 30 October 1954. Now, I want to tell you, these bar mitzvah in all Arab country were nothing what you have here. It was not a wild time. It took about an hour on Thursday morning. I learned how to put on the tefillin. And then on Saturday, you had about 2-3 hours. People would come in, and they brought me lots of gifts, all of them flowers. Unfortunately, I have not been able to keep any of them to show them to you. So that is a bar mitzvah. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit of time to give some background about who are the Jews from Arab land. And it's going to be a bit of nudniky history, but nonetheless, put up with it. It won't last too long, I hope. All right. Now, in this map here, you see the land in which Arabic is spoken. You have 420 million, who knows, maybe more, I don't count them, 420 million worldwide, and only one, as far as I know, Arabic speaker at the residence here. Now, we have visitors who are Arabic speakers, but in fact, at the resident, as far as I know, am I wrong? No, good. So only one here. All right, so look at how many lands are involved in Arabic speaking. But in my case, I'm going to be speaking mostly about 3 of them, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. In fact, Iraq, then Syria, then Lebanon. Okay? All right. Now, just background quickie again. If you're speaking about ethnic groups, denomination, Jewish, you have 3 categories. Ashkenaz are Jews from Europe. Many examples here. You have Sepharad, Jews who are originally from Spain, but had gone to places like Italy and Turkey and Greece. And a lot of them came, in fact, into Syria. And then you have what is called the Mizrahi. These are the Jews from Eastern countries. But I have to tell you, most Jews of Arab land do not consider themselves, I, I, I change it. A lot of Jews from Arab land will not consider themselves Mizrahi, because Mizrahi usually means Jews in Muslim countries, and it can go to Indonesia or places like that. What they consider themselves are Arab Jews. And it's a very controversial term because a lot of Jews refuse to consider any part of their background as having an Arabic. But Arab Jews, that means Jews who spoke Arabic language. That is it. There's nothing political about it. All right. And then you have denominations. You have Orthodox. These are the people who follow rabbinic laws. And Orthodox come from great varieties. As everyone knows, you have 3 Jews, you have 4 groups, you see? All right, so they come a variety, but the variety that you will never find in Arab lands are what are called Hasidic Jews. These are the Jews that dress very peculiarly for most of you. They come from Europe mostly. You will not find anything like that. They are all Orthodox, but no Jew in Arab land was crazy Orthodox like crazy Orthodox in America. They are much more balanced and much more sane. All right. Then you have, if anyone object, it's okay. Conservative, you have conservative Jews, Reform, Reconstruction is secular, and so forth and so on. But in Arab land, all you're going to find are Orthodox Jews. It doesn't mean they don't sin, huh? They sin, but they're Orthodox. All right, now, a bit of history that is important for us. That story of mine becomes what it is because of the 20th century. And in the 20th century, one major event occurred and then another. The first one is World War I. In World War I, when the Allies knew they're going to win, and even before they knew they're going to win, this is France and Britain and Italy, really, they got together and decided what to do with the body, the cadaver of the Ottoman Empire. It was the sick man of Europe, it was the sick man of Asia. So they knew it's not going to last. And they decided already while the war was still going on, while it was not clear that the Allies are going to win, they decided that they will cut it up. They were going to give to Greece the part, as you see in purple. They were going to give a large portion there and create into Iraq and Iran a country called Kurdistan, which even now Kurds are fighting for, but they'll never probably get it. And then the rest of it will be divided between Britain and France, not to own it, but to mandate, to take care of it, to be protecting of it. So eventually what really worked out after a couple of changes is that the British were able to have control of Iraq and of Jordan and partly of Egypt and the area called Palestine at that time, which now is called Israel. The French, took the part of Syria, and in Syria, toward the Mediterranean, there is something called Lebanon, which was not yet a country, but this part here differentiated from the other in that it had a lot of Christians in it. See, okay, so the French were going to take this and that, and the Iraq and the British were going to take this. This become part of my story very quickly. Is that understood? I don't want to take too much time on it, but here it is. Now, the other thing that happened in the 20th century, which is very important, is the Balfour Declaration. The British government, even when the war was going on, had decided that they will try to make a state for Jews within that area that is controlled by the Allies. And that becomes a major, major moment in the history of the area, because if you jump about half a century later, a bit much less actually, there was going to be a state of Israel in 1948. And when the state of Israel created, that changed the whole dynamic of what happened to the Jews of Arab land. All right, it's not a war, but it is a reaction to the creation of the state of Israel. that changed the game. Okay, so let me just point out that independence came to Iraq in 1932. In fact, it was not a happy occasion. They were battling the British for years. The British and the French and the Iraqi were having wars like crazy. And then Lebanon became independent before Syria. Syria, even now, does not accept the fact that there is a Lebanon as an independent country. It's the Middle East, huh? All right. And then you have Israeli independence and all the wars that are going on in that area. So far, so good. All right. Let's see if we change. Oop, it didn't go. Next. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, here we go. All right. Did I skip one? No, I don't think so. That's it. All right. So let me just give you numbers. Before 1948, we're talking about almost 800,000 Jews who were from Arabic-speaking country. And if you add to it countries like Turkey, where they spoke Turkish, and Iran, where they spoke Persian, and Afghanistan, where they spoke Urdu, you have many more, you see. But just in Arabic-speaking country, we're talking about 800,000 of them. All right, so uh, look what happened. In 1948 was probably the highest moment where you can still speak about Jews being still members of the Arab world, all right? The number were great. But suddenly, after 48, the numbers started dwindling very quickly. Oops, sorry. Yes, I think I need to do this one. So if you look at the number in 2018, you can't even fill this hole for the number of Jews that still exist in Arab land. There aren't. In Lebanon, I said 4. Maybe there are 5. Maybe there are 3. Doesn't matter. All right. In Aleppo, excuse me, 4. In Beirut, 15. Probably less. You see. But the point about it is that it basically doesn't exist anymore. All right. And just quickly, if you want to look at why is it that it doesn't work, do I need to point at something? Oh, here we go. All right, I'll tell you about the Jews of North Africa. We're talking about 400,000 or so. And now, by now, we were talking about maybe 3,000 all. In Morocco, you have 2,000 perhaps at most, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more. In Egypt, there are none in North Africa. The only place that still exists where you have a cohesive Jewish community still intact is in Jerba, which is an island in Tunisia, but they're only about what, maybe 1,000. Maybe I undernumbered it here, about 1,000 of them. I don't think they will last much longer, too much longer. All right, now you had the history. Yes, plenty of time. Good. The story I'm going to tell you is about my life, but I'm going to make it like a mehshi, a piece of food, fill it up with goodies. So you will hear now and then few words about different items. Okay, so the story is going to be, it's going to start in oops, sorry, I am not good. It's going to start in Mosul, Iraq. See? It's going to go to Aleppo, and then it's going to end up in Beirut. Notice that this is part of the Silk Road. It doesn't exist anymore, really, but that was part of the Silk Road, making these places so important. All right, now we go. Yeah. They need new batteries. Ooh. All right, Iraq. I start with Iraq because my story begins really there, even though it also started in Syria, but Iraq. So Iraq is a very large country. It had about 120,000 Jews at that time, not all of them in Mosul, which is the city that I'll be speaking about. In fact, the largest number of them were in Baghdad. And the people in Baghdad were very much involved in the culture of Iraq. They were writers, they were musicians. In fact, the best musicians, the best musical groups in the 1930s and 40s were Jewish musicians. And one of the greatest singers of all time was Salima Murad, who was the greatest singer, what else? I'm repeating myself, of Iraq. But they also were politics. They were in politics, one of the few land in which you had members of the Jewish community participating in the legislature over there. So they played a very major role. In Mosul now, the people that you hear about mostly who are Iraqi Jews are the Sassoons. The Sassoons are from Baghdad. If I write them a letter and I'm telling them I'm Sasson, they will say they don't care because we have no relationship whatsoever. We are from Mosul, all right? So there is only, unlike Baghdad, where you have a lot of books written about them, the Sassoons, every other, the Kaduri, every 2 minutes you will hear something about one of them. The people in Mosul don't have much written about them. They were about 13, 14,000, maybe 15,000 at one time. So it's not a very large community. And by the way, we have a scholar here at UNC, Sarah, I forgot, Sarah Shields, yes, who wrote a book about Mosul, but not about the Jews of Mosul. All right. So now here's my story. This man is Hai Aharon Marioma Sasson. He was born in 1876. Now you notice that Hai is his first name, Aharon is his father's name. In the Middle East, Jews would name after their middle name will always be their father's name. The difference being that in Iraq, only if the father had died will they have it, but in Syria, they love to give the name of living father, grandfather, things like that. All right, so Hi Aharon Marioma. Now notice his name is Marioma. Everyone there had two names. One of them was the Aramaic name, the name that people would use with each other. But Sasson would be their Hebrew name. Sasson means joy, happiness. Okay, Marioma is, I don't know exactly, it probably means Mr. Day, D-A-Y. Huh? But I'd love to have been Marioma, but now I am Sasson because they took up the Hebrew name when they moved. All right, now, he married Majoda Hayo Hamo. Now notice Hayo Hamo is also an Aramaic name. Probably it's a Kurdish name. The Kurds, the area north of Mosul was full of Jews who were Kurdish, and many of them went to Israel. But her family was a pretty respectable family. Okay, so together they had 5 boys and 8 girls. Now, she would have had more if he hadn't died, I have to tell you. Right. And look, she lived almost to be a century, so it's not too bad. All right. He was a rather prosperous person. He owned a warehouse, and in that warehouse, goods of all sorts of variety, mostly regional, but especially muslin. Is that the word? The textile, because it comes from Mosul. So they, aha, all right. So he had this and he traded in it. Good. This picture is, here's my grandfather. See him here? All right. This is in 1930. These are the elders of the various small community in the region, many of them Kurdistan, so they're Jews, all of them. They look like, Arabs, but in fact, they are Arab Jews. And what they were doing here is getting together and welcoming this little man here who was coming from Israel to raise funds and to help Kurdish Jews who were much less prosperous. They were farmer, poor, and everything, to move to the land of Israel, which was not yet Israel, it was Palestine. All right. And he was member of that committee, of that group. Oops. I'm not sure why. I think it needs a battery. It needs a battery, really. All right. So let me tell you about the mores that you would find in Iraq, but also in Syria, much less so in Lebanon. All right. So let me just go over things. You will have no socialist or anyone who had feelings about socialism as you had Jews in the 19th century. They were all capitalists to the core. They had no idea about anything else. They were capitalist and entrepreneurial, mostly business. All right. For example, in Baghdad, you had the Sasson family, the Kaduri family. They went to India, China, and England. In Syria, you had banking family, the Safra family. They still have a very big bank that they own. They are now in Brazil. Joseph Farhi in Damascus. So they were like that. But most people were small-time traders. All right. The family structure was purely patriarchal. So you really women had a major role in the household, but they did not make any decisions about anything business. This is typical of most traditional societies in that world. But it was also oriented toward primogeniture. Primogeniture means the oldest boy got mostly everything. Whoever is next could work for his older brother when their father died, but generally they had to find something else to do. They were also fratriarchal. By fratriarchal, I mean, again, the oldest boy actually played the executive of the household. He would be the one to make decisions about whether you can do this or that or not for the other boys and girls in the family. So they played a major role. My brother was a tyrant. When I was in Beirut, whenever we used to get magazines, French magazines to read, he would get them first, and we had to go through hell to get them. We had to do this, we had to take naps, we had to do this, and there was nothing you can do because fratriarchy was alive and well. The social structure was guild. Most businesses, most people who did something will continue it through their children. This is not unlike most traditional society. So people will always follow people's business. No one is going to be raised to think that they're going to do something quite different. If they cannot participate in the family, they will go somewhere else and try to do something equivalent. See, you started now. All right. They have very powerful attachment to ancestry. People need to know where they came from, who were their parents, and when you're establishing marriages, that is very, very important. But because no one who had this type of status would let his son or daughter marry someone from this type of status. So people knew everything. When you give someone, they will know this one is on this level. This is very, very strict in some ways. But also during prayers, much more time than Ashkenazic Jews in their prayers do now. Mizrahi Arab Jews, when they say prayers, they have special prayers for the dead, for the ancestors, and they do it much more often than you would have it in our culture. Polygamy was allowed, but there were very few people who had it. I have a grandfather who at one time had two wives, but only because one of them was very, very, very ill and basically incapable of doing anything. So he kept her, but all right. So I do that. Uh, and they had an incredibly elaborate marriage ceremony. Maybe I'll tell you about it when we come to Syria. All right. The other thing is that I told you already that they were orthodox but not fanatic. They were not crazy. If someone made a mistake and mixed meat and milk, which is a no-no, no one's going to throw them out or put them into a corner or anything like that. Yeah, that happens. The other things that are important is the standards of behavior. I'm simplifying, but there are certain standards that you have to follow. One of the words that you find constantly being used in families everywhere is the word aib. Now, when you say aib, you cannot say it if you're Ashkenaz because is not a sound that is available to you. All right? So aib means shame. Okay? That is when your mother tells you aib, it means you cannot do it. Is it because you didn't pray on time? Is it because you picked your nose? Whatever it is, aib, all right? And the other problem is that if you have aib and people hear about it, you have fdiha, scandal. Ay, 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 ay. Everyone is scared. Your sister talking to a boy in front of everyone? Fdiha. How could you do that? So there are a lot of, these are controls, various forms and controls. And the word that used to scare the heck out of me was when my mother or brother or my father hardly talked to me. Um, I will tell you more about that later. Lazim. Lazim is a Turkish word. It means you must. Before any word that ever come out that you hear, lazim, you must do this, you must do this, you must not do this. So they had a very strict standard, although they were not into punishing horribly. It's just the word, and you behave. That's all. And they have deepest respect for parents. You never hear anyone like a kid saying, giving a lip to his parents. My God, that is never heard of. You just don't do it. And also, when your father goes up to the synagogue, and he has a aliyah, which I'm not going to explain, when he comes down, you kiss his hand. You see, and also during after blessings on Saturday night, Friday night, you kiss the hand of your father, you kiss the hand of your mother. So kissing hand has become part of respect, and you do it throughout your life. Also, when your older brother does something, you stand up. When your older brother does something else, you stand up. See, so all this business of respect for people who are older. I'm making it seem stiff, but all this is part of life. You just don't think about it. All right, now let's continue. Uh, I am having the hardest time with this. I don't. Now here is the boy. All right, look at this gorgeous hunk. That is Murad, in Hebrew name Mordechai, like Mordecai in the story of Esther, because he was born on the eve of Purim, which is the holiday of that. All right. Marioma Sasson, 1927. He is the number 2 boy. All right. He had 2 older sisters and an older brother. His older brother is going to get everything, more or less. A few things left, but he's going to get everything. Most of the time, number 2, my father, would have stayed and worked for his brother when his father passed away, or he worked for an uncle very often. You marry the daughter of an uncle, it's allowed, and then you go up higher. But my father, my aunt Farha tells me, he left at the age of 19 to go to Aleppo because he had no hopes of really becoming top in, right? He went, but my aunt tells me it's because he was destined to marry a certain young girl with whom he did not fancy. So basically, he ran to Aleppo and he never went back to Mosul, although he kept relationship with his family. All right, I will tell you more about him in a minute. And he goes to Aleppo. Now, Aleppo was not Mosul. Aleppo was a much more wealthy city. It had a lot of people who were deep entrepreneur and what have you, a lot of business opportunity. It also had a lot of people who had come from other countries to work there. It had doctors who came in from outside. So it was more cosmopolitan city. And it was also known as a city of scholars by the Jews. This is not, we're talking about Jews, huh? City of scholars. Now, I don't mean they were classicists or economists or historian of Lower Slobovia. What I mean by that is that they were rabbis. That city was very heavily, what is the word, controlled by the rabbinic circles. And the reason for that, but now, before I go to that, let me just tell you that also Aleppo is known for this, its food. You must get this book, Aromas of Aleppo by Pupa Dweck. Not expensive, 35 bucks, gorgeous, big coffee table, terrific recipes. You will not, maybe I should give one to the Forest at Duke. All right. So he comes to Aleppo. Oh, what am I going to do? All right. And he sees this young woman, gorgeous, perfect. She is Emily Salha Dweck. The Dweck is a very famous family, and I will tell you why in a second. She is 16. She is educated. She spoke French. She had studied in the École d'Alliance. She was beautiful normally, and she was, well, normally she wouldn't even look at a guy coming out from outside. You marry from within the community. But for reasons which I will not go into, absolutely not, she he she, she caught his eye and he caught her eye. Did I get it right? Whatever, they did it. They did it. And this is in 1927, 28. And the problem is that she was the granddaughter of one of the toughest rabbi who ever lived in Aleppo, Hacham Yaakov Shaul Dweck. He was a Taliban first rate. I mean, really very tough. If anyone, he became the head of the rabbis in that area, Abedin, and he controlled a lot of things in that city. People would not dare brook what the rabbi decide. And the reason why Aleppo is so important and why so involved in rabbinics and rabbis is because of this. Now here he is over here, and you can see him again holding that stick right there. You see his name Yaakov? That's me. I'm named after him. If he was alive today, he will probably turn over. All right. All right. Now, the reason why Aleppo is so important is because within that city, there was a very important synagogue. According to the traditions in Aleppo itself, that synagogue, oh yeah, yeah, time is passing. That synagogue was built by a commander of King David himself. Totally ridiculous. Because in fact, that would be 1200 BC, huh? 1100, 1000 BC anyway. In fact, it is 8th, 9th century foundation, which is old enough. You know, you will never find a synagogue in Chapel Hill that old. In any case, it was destroyed a number of times. It was the old synagogue. And in it, was in this, there was a cave. And in this cave, something called the Aleppo Codex. Now, I have to take my hat and become a biblical scholar for 2 minutes so you can understand why this book made the city so religiously oriented. All right. Now, this codex, it means that it's a text that has the entire Hebrew Bible done in such a way that it could be read easily by anyone, and I'll explain it in a second. That codex was done around 930 AD, and it lasted a very long time until finally now it is in Jerusalem after many stories in which I will not go into. But let me just tell you why this text is so important. All right. Now, normally, if you go to synagogue on Saturday and you are reading the 5 books of Moses, because you do that chapters, different chapters on Saturday. The text itself is written like something like this up here. You see it on the right, on the next time get batteries. All right, you see this? Now look at this. Letters, one after the other with very little spacing, some, but not too much. This is from the Isaiah scroll, which was in Qumran. All these are consonant. There are no vowels whatsoever on it. Now, it doesn't mean that ancient Hebrew didn't have vowels. It's just that they did not write them. Okay, so if you have something like Forest at Duke and you try to cut it up on your own, you can make for a state dike or first to duck. You can break it up into 1,000 different words. Think about all this, how you can chop the salami over there. You can have Moses do anything you want. All right, so what happened is 930 AD, some of the people, Solomon ben Beoya, it doesn't matter the name, made it possible to put vowels underneath the consonant. Now, he was not the first to invent it. Already by the 6th century, some rabbis had already invented the system. But what you have now here are vowels underneath and over consonants, and they also have accents and singing tropes, so that when you read the text now from this type of text, this is what you find when you buy a Bible in Hebrew. It will have vowels up and down. So it made it possible to arrest total crazy interpretation of the Hebrew text. That's why it was so important. Anyone who wanted to know anything about how to pronounce these holy words, they could go to Aleppo. And when they get there, they will not be allowed to see it. No, no one was allowed really to see it, except if you are an exceptional rabbi. So basically, it was an heirloom, it was sacred, and made the whole city very, very religious. Now, uh, we go back. So they got engaged and they get married. He comes there in 1927. By 1928, Emily Dweck, Murad H. Sasson, fiancé. They are engaged. This is their official engagement card. And notice, no more Marioma. He is Sasson. When I tell my brothers now in New York that our name is Marioma, they are appalled. How could you say that? We're Sasson. But basically, that's the name. And here they got married, October 29, 1998. Now, please, she is the granddaughter of a rabbi, all right, of one of the great rabbis. And look what she's dressed as. This is what, flapper? Flapper. I don't know if they flapped, but in any case, this is an absolutely, notice she's a bit taller than her husband. All right, so they get married and they have children very quickly. From 1928 until 1941, they had 7 children, lost 2. All right? This is not the entire family. You have sisters, and if you want to know which one is me, yeah, I don't think I have to tell you, but here I am, the one with the curls. Can you see it? All right. And here we are, me and my brother. We're practically almost twin, a year, 14-month difference. Now, this guy here is he's important because in 2008, he won this New York lottery, $14 million. And I got an umbrella and a little hand something, sacoche, the one that I would give here for people to take their food. Huh? All right, so I got this out of it. All right, now, by 1946, 45, it was pretty well known that we're not going to last there at all because Israel was about to be a state and Jews, their fate is not going to be good in those land. Syria, certainly, because they were vehemently anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and everything. The reason for that, you should know, maybe I'll make it very quick, is that theology, in Islamic theology, any land that was occupied at one time by Muslims cannot be given away. See? So it created theological problem, and the theology drove everything else to politics. See how it works? All right. So now, my father, earlier than when trouble began, decided to go to Beirut because opportunities were better. And in Lebanon was a quite a different world entirely from Syria or even Iraq. Lebanon, for the Jewish community, was an artificial community. What I mean by that, in Beirut, there hardly were any Jews in the year 1900. But by 1900 and by 1950s and 60s, it had among the largest Jewish group that still remained in Arab land. Why? Because Jews from Turkey, Jews from Egypt, Jews from Iraq, all of them will go there because it was much more tolerant. Now, why was it tolerant? Tolerant because Lebanon was made up with so many different religions that they balanced each other and left the Jews alone. All right? So, because of that, Jews, I mean, me jumping ahead, will remain in Lebanon until 1980, which by then, of course, no Jews were left at all in all the other Arab land. So, we lived in Beirut. Right, this area here is where at one time used to be the old Phoenician city of Beirut. And in that area, there was a place called Wadi Abu Jamil, which means the shtetl of Abu Jamil. And that's where 90% of the Jewish people in Lebanon, in Beirut, used to live. Okay? And right in it was the great synagogue, Magen Abraham. It was built in 1925 by a fellow named Abraham Eliyahu Sasson. Now, he is a Baghdadi Sasson. He wouldn't even look at me. All right. But he lived actually in Shanghai, maybe in Shanghai, maybe Hong Kong. In any case, he sent money to build the synagogue. It was the latest. It was absolutely gorgeous. But and it was the center of the Jewish community. So everyone, when we moved to Beirut, we lived within 2 blocks, not even that much from there. All right. This is a reconstruction of it because in in what was it? In 2000, when was it? 1983, 82, 83, when the Israelis moved into Beirut, by mistake, they bombed the synagogue. So it was in a very bad shape. And only much later did they raise enough funds, both from the country Lebanon itself, they gave quite a bit of money, and from Jewish money abroad, mostly the Safra of Brazil, and they reconstructed. And here is the inside of it. And the reason why I tell you is because right there is where I used to sit. Now, these synagogues are pretty orthodox. Up there is where women, and notice there's covering so no one can look up. Over here are men, all right? In this area here are the more wealthy members of the community. My father used to sit somewhere here, but occasionally would slip here. But in fact, he was not wealthy. All right, so here is a picture of me, my brother, and one of my older sisters. She's not the oldest, and my father at some wedding. I have no idea where my mother was. Maybe she was greeting the bride's parents, whatever. But here we are outside of the synagogue, just to show you that I was there. All right. And now let me just say something about Lebanon. Because, as I told you, it was a centripetal place. People came there. It was much more cosmopolitan. Rabbis hardly played a role in Lebanon. And as a result of that, uh, the great rabbi of Beirut was a fellow who never spoke a word of Arabic. He was an Ashkenaz. No one understood what he said, but no one cared. They were all Orthodox, but they were not, no one would run to a rabbi to find out what to do. And in fact, you had many more synagogues in the area. Now, the interesting thing here is the world of, hey, how long do I have? No, I'm not going to go until 6. People will be starving. Okay, so she is tough. She won't talk to me for weeks if I didn't talk too much. All right. All right. So listen, the interesting thing is the chasm between the world of adults and children. In America, you try to have your children act as if they are adult. No one ever in Beirut ever, if parents would ever treat their children as if they're adults. Children remain children. And the world of adults and the world of children was very big chasm, which means that you're allowed to do what it is. You didn't have to behave. Everyone behaved anyway, but you did not have to constantly being worried. You never had to go and sell newspaper so you can learn what it is to earn a living. What? You would never do that. You wait until you're grown up. You're married. You marry into wealth, hopefully, or something, and poof, this is where it goes. All right. So the world is divided quite a bit. The other thing that is important, although already in Syria it was there, but in Lebanon, the Alliance Israélite Universelle was the major tool of education for most Jewish children, although some of them went to other places. But the Alliance, you thought you were French. I was shocked to learn when I was there that in London, most of the streets had names of the defeat of Napoleon. I couldn't believe it. How could anyone be proud of places that Napoleon lost? Just terrible. All right, Wellington and all. Just whereas in France, everyone had beautiful Wagram, Austerlitz, all these places that he had won. All right, so we thought we're French. Alexandre Dumas might as well be an Arab, as far as I was concerned. And we spoke with each other Arabic and French. But basically, our orientation was French. And the young people, if they are at all ambitious, they will go to France and come back to Lebanon. But still, it was a very highly mercantile place. Business was the most important thing. My father will go to the souk in the morning, and very often he'd come back in the afternoon for lunch and go back again. But when he didn't come back, he will send a boy to come to my house, and she will prepare what they call a matbaka, which is many-tiered, where you put foods, because they didn't have refrigeration. So the boy will take it, they eat it, and he bring it back. He would stay occasionally there. But my father was, we call a simsar. He would go from a wholesaler and negotiate in such a way to sell their product to retailers, and he would get commission. So that was what his job. When he came to America, he couldn't find any work like that, so it was difficult for him. And when I think about it, we come in America in 1955. He hardly had a chance to learn. He was in his 40s, mid 40s, but he couldn't adapt because that world was so different. He took a big chance, he and my mother, to bring us here. All right. So, but it's a child paradise, Lebanon. You will hardly find any person who came out from Syria, from Aleppo, who will say, "I want to go back." You will never find any Jew who will not say that Lebanon was the most wonderful place in the world. It's almost like Germans who talked about Germany, even though they were in much worse shape. We had a wonderful time. In the winter, which was hardly a winter, one time my brother comes to me, he says, "Jack, get up, get up." I said, "What?" He says, "There is a snowflake." We've never seen a snowflake. So, and in the summer, we all went to the mountain, only 3/4 of an hour drive away. And we spent the whole summer there. at 4 o'clock in the morning, sometimes in the month of May, no, June. A truck will come 4 o'clock in the morning, loads up everything, all that, and take you to a place that you rented up, and you stayed there for a month, for a few months. You came back in October when school started again. So it was a child's paradise. And here I am. I got to tell you that. My proudest day, I had won a prize. Sinbad le Marin was the book they gave me. I was number two in a class. There was a kid named Beno Attar. I hated him. He always beat me. All right. And here it is. We were Boy Scouts. And while in Lebanon, my mother had gave birth to her last child, who is now a very famous orthopedic doctor in New York. He tells me he's famous. I don't know. All right. And here I am on what they call a key in French, stilts. I was very proud. Okay, so let's continue. In the last year I was there, 55, for some reason they didn't have, they had too many students and they didn't have room, so they put girls and boys together. This was unheard of, but for me it was paradise because I had the hots for this little girl there. Yeah. All right. So that was it. Some of these people I've gotten in contact with recently, so it's a continuing story. Notice how the boys are divided, are there and here. Okay. Ah, come on, come on. We're almost gonna finish. Oh, oops. Ah, I'm so sorry. Okay. Ah, this is my almost the last days because I was bar mitzvahed over there. I already invited you. You didn't bring me a gift, but it's okay. And here I am. Look at me, cool. Look at these glasses. I thought I'm going to come to America and I better get ready for the American life. So I was dressed, and then, all right, yipes. This is very. Oh, here it is. Ah, Beno Attar. He was actually my best friend, but I hated him. Not only was he always the best in classes, but he played the accordion. And he did it so beautifully. I hated him. All right. So here he is. He ended up in Brazil, very big shot. And then David Tarab, who's dead, but he was in Mexico. And here is Roger Dana in Venezuela. So that gives you a notion of what happened to the community. So we left in August 1955. However, I had an afterlife because in 1980, someone sent me a 1990s, excuse me, someone sent me a novel from France, a friend of mine, in which it's called Last Tango in Beirut, which is thought was the picture that I showed you. And it turns out it's about a fellow named Jacques Sasson, who was 17 years old, and he taught in Beirut for many years. But the amazing thing about this virtual me is that he had success with the girls unheard of. In my days, you hardly ever talk to a girl. But this guy was amazing. And not only that, but he continued his escapades, this Jacques Sasson, when he moved to Montreal. And that book is called Première Farandole à Montréal. Could you play that piece? All right. Now, if you want to know what a farandole is, listen. Oops, no, 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 no. All right, here we go, go. Woohoo, you got to know what a farandole is. You have to go to the screen, the full thing. Uh, Okay, now.
Did you know some dish
Oh,
soaps don't remove all the grease, even with scrubbing?
What?
that
I
is
just
not a
moved. Try
farondol.
Dawn Platinum. It removes 99% of grease and food residue. That's why Dawn
Wow.
is trusted to save
All right,
wildlife and protect
I'm
our
gonna give
bottom.
up.
Dawn Platinum cleans to the squeak.
You should be able. You heard that, no? See, from the Arlesienne, huh? All right. So that is more or less my full story, but I want to have a couple of more things. Okay, you can stop it. You can stop it. Ooh. Oh, BJ, forgive me. Okay, one more slide, because I want to tell you what happened to the Jews of Arab land, and then that's it. I'll stop it. All right. Okay. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. All right. So this is what happened. A great number went to Europe. Great Britain, Manchester, Italy, France. In the United States, 40,000. And in Canada, no, that's United States and Canada. In Canada, most people from Lebanon went to Canada. The reason for that is because they had facility in French, in Montreal especially, but also because it's easier to get into Canada than to come to the United States. So you have about 30,000 in New York. Latin America is full of my people. Now, I'm not talking about people from North Africa. They went other places. The Tunisian went to France. The Libyan went to Italy, Morocco. A lot of them went to Canada also, but also to France. So the diaspora is the diaspora. What's interesting is relatively few of them, especially in the early days, would go to Israel. Israel at the time when the breakup was happening was a rather poor country, and these guys were entrepreneur, and also they hated the notion of going to a place that was socialist because Israel was also. But eventually they got there. That's it. I'm not going to go anymore. Thank you very much. I think uh, I don't know. I don't know if you have. If you would like, I don't know. You well, please, if you feel like you need to go, please go. Yes.
What did the Arab countries do to force, the Jews of the Arab countries to emigrate? You mentioned it was because of uh, the advent of Israel, but
Yeah.
what kind
All
of
right.
specifically did they do?
Nothing like what happened in Europe. There was no Holocaust. But what did they put the screws on? For example, in Iraq, they say if you want to remain a happy citizen of Iraq with full right, which in fact you never had because by then they were tightening the screws, you could. But if you don't, take your money and leave your money, leave everything behind and leave. We don't care where you go. In fact, they all knew they were going to Israel. So in 1952, 53, almost all the Jews of Iraq left, a couple of thousand left behind. In Syria, they made it impossible for Jews to work in anything but menial type of work. And many of them had to escape to Lebanon before they could go anywhere else. So what it was, in Egypt, it was much better until 1956, when the war made it very difficult for Jews to remain there. And after the 67 war, that's it. There were no Jews. Pretty much they were leaving. So every one of them, there was never any really killing. There was one pogrom in Iraq, but that was when the Germans, the Nazis, had a very strong influence in Baghdad in 1941. But generally, you'd never had any murders or anything like that. Occasionally, people would be killed, kidnapped, and so forth, but nothing like what you had in Europe. They just made it life miserable, and you couldn't. And people who are Jews, especially people who are used to businesses and so forth, they were choking. Just two of my uncles remained in Aleppo, and they were broken people by the time they were able to leave. One of them died there, So he never was able, they were practically starving. So it was not good. Um, the fact that they were able to leave was a miracle. It's a long story. Okay? Oh, you have a question there?
In the UN of the State of Israel. But do you have any background on
Well,
why
because
it's called?
you see, Israel as a nation before Christ, there was a country called Israel. And to distinguish it from the modern Israel, they are called it Medinat Israel, which in Hebrew is the state of Israel. So they distinguish it from ancient Israel. All right. Any other? That's it? Well, thank you again very, very much. Thank you very much.